This recipe is for a Sicilian stuffed eggplant. It's a traditional recipe, however there are many traditional recipes for stuffed eggplant in Sicily. This is an authentic recipe in exactly the way that I've prepared it and served it in restaurants. I'm going to begin with a baking dish that's been lined with a little bit of baking paper, and I'm going to put some coarse salt into that. Eggplant has been sliced. I'm going to put olive oil on that and put it down. This is going to go into a 180-degree oven for 30 minutes. Okay, it's been 30 minutes. They're done, very soft. I'm going to turn them over and let them cool off. We'll let them cool completely before we scoop them out. We'll begin making the filling into a pan that's already hot. We're going to add about 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil and the fennel. This has been the bulb sliced. We're not using the top parts. The stem parts are way too solid and hard to cook down, so we're not using those. As you can see, these are fairly large pieces, irregular, won't matter because when these are done cooking, they're going to be very, very soft. We're also going to add to this about a teaspoon of sugar and a teaspoon of salt. Don't stir them too much, just a little bit, because you want that caramelization to take place. And if you stir them too much, that won't happen. You do want to make sure that the salt and sugar are distributed and that the pieces are all coated with the olive oil. Also, don't try to do this too fast or you'll burn the pieces and you won't have caramelization, you'll just have burned on the outside. It's going to take a few minutes. Okay, now what we've got here is some little brown bits starting to form on the thinner parts of the fennel. So what we're going to do here, a little trick, we're going to add our onion onto the top of this. We're not going to stir. The onion is going to lower the temperature of the pan down, create a little bit of moisture, and that fennel underneath there is going to keep steaming away under the onion. We're not going to stir it, we're not going to do anything. At this point we can also add the chili. This is one whole red chili. I've taken out the seeds and most of the membrane so that it isn't too hot. We're just going to leave it sit like this, the fennel underneath, for a good 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, it's been about 3 minutes now. Now we're going to start stirring it around. And that fennel that was at the bottom has been made very, very tender. The onions are starting to cook. Now this is going to have to cook down quite a bit. This is going to be, you want these onions to be quite caramelized, and that will take some time, probably about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more. One of the things that you can do while you're cooking, if you don't have time to keep watching this and stirring it, a little restaurant trick, you can move the onions, pile them up around the edge of the pan like this, leave the middle empty, because the middle, the hottest part of the pan, that's where the burning is going to happen. So if you have to go run over and take care of some other food, you can do this and you don't have to worry about it burning for 3 or 4 minutes. Of course, it also makes it take longer to cook, so that's only something you do when you really need it. I'm going to be using some fresh basil in just a minute. So what I've got here is 4 basil leaves. I'm just going to roll them up like this and cut them into little chiffonade. Now it's been about 10 minutes for this cooking, and as you can see, it's getting quite dark now. It's not burnt. This is not burnt at all. It's just nice and caramelized. That's about the point you want it to be. It's dark. I did it on a medium heat, not a high heat, because you don't want to burn it. At this point, we're going to add a couple of anchovies that have been soaked in milk. And if you don't think you like anchovies, or you're a vegetarian, a strict vegetarian, and you don't want to have any meat in it, then you can leave these out. But this won't give it the taste you're thinking of when you had pizza that had bad anchovies on it. When you soak them in milk, they lose most of the fishy taste. And what you're left with is just a nice depth of flavor in the final dish. Just a little bit of saltiness and a lot of depth. This is some garlic we're also going to add. We're also going to add a couple of tablespoons of pine nuts at this point. Now, the pine nuts, sometimes I toast. This is one of the dishes that I don't toast them. It's not traditional to toast them, and it actually tastes better when they're not toasted in this, as strange as that seems. If you toast them, it intensifies the flavor, and then the pine nuts start to dominate, and you get too much of a pine nut flavor in it. Now we're also going to add 20 grams, so somewhere around 3/4 of an ounce of raisins in 2 ounces of white wine. I microwaved that in the, for about 30 or 45 seconds first, and then let it sit. The microwave will help the raisins plump up and absorb that wine. You're just going to let this cook down until there's no more moisture left in the pan. You don't want to have any excess of liquid. Okay, it's been a minute or two. This is quite dry on the bottom now, as you can see. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill the heat, but I'm going to leave it on where the heat was. So it's going to leave this in the hot pan, finish drying out just a little bit more. And I'm going to add little freshly grated orange zest. In Sicily, there's orange groves everywhere. They put orange zest in everything. And I'm going to add those that chiffonade of basil. But this is not going to really be cooked in this part. It'll be cooked when it goes into the oven later. And that's fine. We're just going to leave it sit like this and turn our attention to the eggplant. Is scrape out the pulp from the eggplant. You don't try to get all of it, because that will weaken the walls of the eggplant too much. And it's already been cooked for 30 minutes, and it's going to be cooked some more. So you don't have to worry about it. That will be perfectly edible when it's done. Now this pulp is going to go into a food processor when you get all the 4 pieces of eggplant scooped out. It's going to go into a food processor for just a few seconds to turn it into a paste. Okay, we have our pureed eggplant pulp. We're going to add the contents from the pan, all the pine nuts and onions, fennel, all that was cooked together. Now to this we're going to add a couple of tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese, about a tablespoon of breadcrumbs, just a little bit as a binder, 1 whole egg yolk, yolk only, some fresh ground black pepper. Okay, it's time to get these ready for the oven. I'm going to begin by putting a little bit of the same tomato sauce down that's online in my other video. The only difference with this recipe is that I added about a teaspoon of fennel seeds at the same time that I added the fresh tomatoes. You could just follow that recipe and add fennel seeds and you will get this sauce. Once you've got some sauce down, you're going to add the eggplant to it. This is a little bit of a messy operation. You divide the eggplants, rather the filling, into 4 equal parts. And you kind of mount it in there, set it on top of the sauce. That's all there's to it. You do it 4 times, of course. Okay, we got them all there. Now we're going to put a little bit of the sauce over the top. You don't want to just pour it over the top, because this is not about the tomato sauce. It's about the eggplant and the contents that are in it. You don't want to overwhelm it with sauce. There's got to be some there. It's a good part of the flavor, but it's all about the eggplant in this dish. And that's enough. Into the oven. 180 degrees again with another 25 to 30 minutes. You're going to check out, see what it looks like in 25 minutes, see if it's ready. Okay, it's out of the oven. It's been 25 minutes at 180 Celsius, but I did have fan assist going on with the oven. Now I'm just going to grate a little more Parmesan over the top of this. And if we're eating this the traditional Italian way, we're going to let this cool to room temperature first, almost room temperature, just warm, and then add a little pepper flake over the top of it. You serve this with a glass of red wine, and you're in Palermo. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.